I actually did record this video right after the health one the other day, or I started to rather, and the battery on my camera died. So anyway, a couple days later, here I am giving this another go. So testosterone, that was kind of I wanted to make this a separate video talking about my different blood work that I've had done over the past year or so, and what the labs were showing me in terms of my testosterone levels. Now again, as I had mentioned, I felt like I'd imagined that they'd be pretty hardy, although the first one that I did, there is an asterisk next to, because that was about 2 weeks into a colitis flare-up, so my sleep wasn't very good. Obviously my nutrition's a little bit off because I couldn't eat as much due to the inflammation and everything. So yeah, probably like 2-3 hours of sleep a night, and then maybe random naps in the middle of the day, on top of not the greatest diet. I did imagine that maybe things weren't going to be great, plus just whatever stress the inflammation of the colitis flare-up was causing on my body might be impacting things negatively. So the first test was done May 18th of 2021. Now, this was a test done for free by a local TRT clinic, or testosterone replacement clinic. So all they do is they test your total testosterone. If your total testosterone tests out under 420 nanograms per deciliter, that's their threshold, their standard for what level you need to be for them to prescribe. So you need to be under 420 nanograms per deciliter. If it tests under that, they do not test your SHBG, so you don't know your free testosterone. They only look at your free testosterone if you test out over that. So this first one, I was quite a bit below. What do we got? My total testosterone was 322 nanograms per deciliter. So I did talk to the doctor. I explained to her that I have ulcerative colitis, that I was in the midst of a flare-up, my sleep hadn't been good, etc., and asked what it would cost for me to come in and do a retest later. She was super cool, said, actually, don't even worry about it. If you have health issues going on, we want to make sure that these results are accurate before we just start prescribing, so let's go ahead and we'll do a retest whenever you feel ready. So just call us, let us know when you're healthy again. We'll do it over again. So I went in, what do we have here? September 14th, 2021. So this is after I'd had that really long colitis flare-up, as I had mentioned in the health video. Lasted almost 4 months. But at this point I was about a month post any symptoms, so I was feeling really good. My diet had been good, my sleep had been good, my workouts were going well, and my weight was mostly back to normal. I was maybe still a little bit low, but not too bad. And I felt well, my energy was awesome. Relatively speaking, for how I had been feeling, at least for the past several months, my energy felt really good. So this time my total testosterone came out to 475 nanograms per deciliter. So awesome that it was like a 50% increase. Still pretty shy of, I guess, what I was hoping for, but I was trying to be, kind to myself and say, well, you were just really sick for a long time. Maybe it's just taking a little while for things to bounce back. So this time they did test out the SHBG, and that came out to 48.3 nanomoles per liter. So the reference range that they gave me on that was 16.5 to 55.9. So even though I was within the range, it was still pretty elevated, and that elevated number gave me a free testosterone level, they had said, of 7.7 nanograms per deciliter. So my free testosterone was still pretty low, and it was in a range that they said would then allow them to prescribe testosterone replacement therapy. But I was feeling good, overall. And to be quite frank, the idea of TRT is an emotional thing for me. I've been, I'm still relatively young. I'm 36 years old. At the time, 35. I think there was a little bit it was a month before my 35th birthday, or 36th birthday. But also, I've just been doing this naturally for so long, and I think there's always been a lot of pride in what I've been able to accomplish naturally. And I do try and be honest with myself sometimes about, does it matter? I'm competing in the NPC. I'm not the strongest natural athlete. I'm not the biggest natural athlete. I'm good. And I would argue pretty darn good for a natural athlete. but I'm certainly not the best, and I also don't compete in a tested federation. So sometimes I just ask myself, the guys on the Olympia stage, especially the top guys on the Olympia stage, if they were competing naturally, would I be as good or better than they are? Or is this just kind of like a superficial bragging right for me? Nonetheless, it's always been something I've had an emotional attachment to. And so that, combined with I had just got done being sick for quite a long time, I was really not interested at that point. It just didn't feel like the right decision. But I'd been doing a lot of reading while I was sick about testosterone and its impact on ulcerative colitis. And now, I don't have any sources cited for this because a lot of this information was more in forums. Some of it was written by doctors saying that, they had worked with patients and some of the results, but none of this is any sort of like official anything. This is just, I think, primarily anecdotal. But it seemed, based on some of the anecdotal evidence I was reading, and then I think there was one like journal article that was written by a doctor, but again, it wasn't like an official study, that had indicated that one, it was common for people with ulcerative colitis to have lower, or men with ulcerative colitis at least, to have lower testosterone levels, but two, that sometimes supplemented testosterone levels seem to help with their symptoms of the colitis, help manage those symptoms. So this had me a little bit intrigued, because it was something that I remember a friend of mine years ago, many years ago, when I was first diagnosed, had said that just based on what testosterone does, that might be something like, because I've always contemplated, because of the sport that I do, it just never felt right for me, but they had said they'd be curious if that would actually be something that have a positive impact on my colitis. Again, messing with unknowns, and I never chose to do it. On top of, I felt like I was doing a pretty good job as it was, so I didn't really feel the need to, or the urge to, or compelled to. So I went ahead and said, you know what, give myself at least 6 more months, let my body recover, heal, and go in again when I've been 100% and symptom free for a prolonged period of time, and let's see where we're at. So that's what I did. The exact date here is March 21st, 2020, was when I had the blood sample collected. Now, the first 2 tests I went in, first one was around 12:30 in the afternoon, second one was right about noon. Both of them were post-workout, and I went with a friend of mine who was also interested in kind of seeing where his levels were at as well. So both of them were post-workout at about midday, so not super late in the day. I don't know the impact that working out would or would not have. Excuse me, but that's just a reference. This last one was 8 a.m. So it was fasted. I was, did I think about an 11-hour fast. They said minimum 10 hours. I think it was roughly 11 hours. Now I did mess up a little bit because a buddy of mine was, or is getting ready for a competition at the moment. He was having a cheat meal the day before. I decided to partake with him. I'm not getting ready for a competition. I just felt like eating a bunch of junk food with a buddy and hanging out, playing video games, whatever. I probably put down roughly 5,000 calories of all junk food within about 14 hours of getting the blood drawn. Now, I don't think that would have too much of a hormonal impact, but I did have an idea, because it was a full blood panel this time, not just the hormones, that might negatively impact my LDL a little bit, might have my blood pressure up a little bit. My blood pressure was up a little bit, not anything that I haven't seen sometimes after having higher sodium intake for a day or two. And my LDL was elevated a bit. It was at 137. My LDL to HDL ratio was still good. It says my HDL is 55. So it wasn't anything, like there was nothing that was like way outside of range, just a couple things minorly elevated. But again, I felt like that was probably very possibly had something to do with the bad food. I'm actually going to be going in probably within the next month or so to my primary care doctor, and I going to be getting my blood work done with her, getting the lipid panels and all that. So we'll see if the cholesterol is any better or not. I'd imagine it will be. Anywho, the main part, or the main reason for this, right, was the testosterone. So 7 months, no colitis issues, maintaining a healthy weight of around 206 to 208 pounds, so a normal like off-season weight for me, and my total testosterone was 426 nanograms per deciliter. So this was in the morning, which I was told would give a better read. So maybe, I don't know if things were a little bit inflated from the workout before. I'm not sure. But on a positive note, my SHBG was way down. So my free testosterone this time was at a 9 instead of a 7.7. So it was just barely within the reference range. The reference range they gave on this one was 8.7 to 25.1. And so talking to the doctor, they did say that it was underneath their threshold to prescribe, even though I was in the reference range. So kind of like the total testosterone, the reference range, is the low end they have here for LabCorp is 264 nanograms per deciliter. It goes 264 to 916. So again, big ranges for both of them. But for the prescription reference range, it's a little bit above that bottom end. So it's not, you don't have to be below the low end, apparently, for all of this. So yeah, I guess with this, I did kind of a lot of hemming and hawing, and I've been going back and forth for a while. But I did ultimately decide that I am going to give TRT a shot. So for me, this was a pretty emotional decision because I take a lot of pride in being natural and having done a lot of the strength feats that I've done, being relatively competitive within the sport of bodybuilding, and making progress each time that I do go out there, being a little bit sharper, a little bit fuller, or whatever it might be, but having my little, incremental improvements, no matter how small they are. I've always felt really good about that I'm doing this, and I'm still doing it naturally after, 16 years of competing. But because of the, lower testosterone levels, combined with some of the issues with the colitis and reading, that might impact it. So having, being in a range that I could qualify for TRT and actually do this through a doctor, but also having read that little bit that maybe it'd be something that could impact my colitis in a positive way. And then also, of course, I've always been curious about what could I do with just a small amount of testosterone and a TRT range in the bodybuilding world. So I don't think this is something that I would have done if it was just health or if it was just bodybuilding. I think for me, because it is so emotional for me to make this leap, because there's so much, like I said, there's so much pride for me personally in, everything that I've done naturally. But because I do have both of those possibilities of potential health benefits on top of performance benefits, and both of those things are interesting to me. And then also, to be quite honest, because I felt like I brought my best ever to nationals this past December, and I landed 10th place. That was another thing that had me feel like, sure, I could probably achieve that goal of making it to the IFBB naturally, and not probably, I feel very confident I could, but it would just be a matter of continuing to do these national shows, continuing to do these pro qualifying events, and eventually I'm going to be at one that's maybe not quite as competitive as some of the others, and it's just going to be based on, not enough of the top or the best people showed up, and I got through. And I guess to me, it's like, is that valuable to me? Do I want to do it that way? And I don't. If I did it, I'd want to be able to show up to any show in the nation. It doesn't matter. It could be the best competitors, and I'm just undeniable. That would be the hope or the goal. Also, a friend of mine a couple years ago started taking TRT, and I saw the impact that a relatively low dose had on him in terms of his physique, his energy, his mood, everything. And it had me start kind of, pondering, is this actually something that you can get some of these performance benefits in a safe and healthy way? Because it was always presented to me, even by friends of mine who are professional bodybuilders, that you can mitigate risk, but you can't avoid them. And you can do it healthier, but it's not healthy. Now, a lot of these guys too will talk about testosterone dosages in the 4 or 5 or even higher milligram per week doses, whereas the company that I'm going through is recommending for me to start at 200 milligrams a week. Now, I'm actually going to start a little bit lower than that, and this isn't based on anything, so I'm not recommending anything. I'm just sharing, I guess, what I'm doing or what I will be doing. I haven't started yet, but when I do, I'm going to start at 180 milligrams per week. Now, the reason that I chose this seems somewhat arbitrary, but it's really just based off of talking to people who've done TRT as well as talking to people who've done TRT for the performance benefit. And 180 milligrams per week seems like kind of that the lower end of dosing that is common for people to still see a performance benefit with. So I'm thinking if I could start lower than they're recommending in the beginning, and if I could still get that performance benefit, then I'm sure I'm also still going to be feeling well and having the health benefits that could potentially come with this anyway. So I don't need to start as high. And when it comes to something I'm apprehensive with, I usually am a person who believes in moderation. Start off a little bit more mild, and if I don't need more, why start with more? Now, I could start with lower. I do know people who've talked about dosages as low as like 150 milligrams per week, still netting some benefits, but that seems less common. And I guess like I said, I could start there. I just kind of, in talking to enough people, I decided I'm being recommended to start a little bit higher. I feel confident that I'm going to get the results I'm looking for in terms of some physique enhancement as well as feeling better at a little bit lower dose than that, about a 10% lower dose than that. So I'm just going to start there. We'll see how I feel. We'll see how my blood work looks. We'll worry about all that as we move. And if at any point, the doctor's saying, hey, we're not seeing the results, you should increase, then I'll go ahead and I'll move up to the 200 like they recommended. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm making a lot of assumptions with this, but I feel like, just based off the people I know who eat well, exercise, don't drink, try and get a good night's sleep, all these factors that I do already to live a healthier lifestyle and to benefit their training and everything else, who have done TRT through some of these local clinics, is actually, as I was looking into it, found out I knew more people than I realized. It seems like most of them aren't doing even 200 a week. Now, I do know some people who are working through local clinics who are doing 200, 210, 220 milligrams per week of testosterone, and that's just to keep them kind of around maybe 700 nanograms per deciliter for the total testosterone, which seems to be where a lot of the local clinics, like, that's what their standard is, as opposed to testing everything. But those are people who usually, from talking to them, they don't eat as well. Their sleep schedules are more erratic. They do consume alcohol. So they're doing less things that are good for them. So I'm thinking that being somebody who's doing everything else pretty well, I probably won't need to have that same dose to be able to feel pretty awesome. So anyway, I guess that's kind of why I decided that I'm going to start making some videos more frequently now. Is I am going to be starting TRT. Every time I say that, it makes me feel like uneasy almost. But it's something I've been going back and forth with for a long time. And, by long time, I mean since I got that first blood work back that showed me my testosterone was kind of low. And I decided if I'm going to do it, I want to document it. Because if I do have the kind of response that I think I might, I'd love to be able to document that you can get really good results with a pretty moderate dose of testosterone without putting in all these other compounds and doing all these other things. And just kind of be an advocate, I guess, for people if it's anything they aren't thinking about, that they do it in a more reserved manner. I'm blanking on how exactly I want to phrase this, but that you don't just come out the gates with these huge doses of especially multiple drugs and do all of that. And who knows, maybe I'm not going to get the results that I think I am. I have it in my head that I'm going to put on with what I'm talking about, probably 10 pounds or so. and maybe I'm way off. But I am going to be documenting it. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Doesn't matter. I think it'll be interesting to go ahead and put these videos out though as I go. I'm going to be talking about other things too, like my training philosophies, what I'm doing. And that's another thing. Initially, I'm not going to change my caloric intake at all. Right now, I'm eating probably about 3,400 calories a day to maintain that 206 to 208 pound weight. I'm going to maintain that for the time being and just kind of see what just adding that little bit of testosterone does for me. If at any point I do change that, I will share that. Also, my workouts, I'm going to train the way I've always trained. So heavy, hard, and frequent. I like to train everything 3 times a week. I'm going to keep up with that. So yeah, this one's already probably a little bit longer than it needs to be. So we're going to end this one here, and then I'll be putting together probably another video this week of just some baseline metrics of where I am at the moment in terms of physique, some of my lifts, things like that, because I think that'll be fun to document as well. So anyway, yeah, that's that, and we'll get the baseline stuff out soon. I was trying to see if there'd be a good place to kind of put these in during the video, and honestly, my video editing's not great, so I was getting a little bit more annoying than I wanted it to be, so I figured I'd just throw these in at the end. But here are the 3 labs that I had done with for my testosterone over the past 10 months or so. As you'll notice, the last one is a bit more extensive, but these are all the numbers that I discussed in the video.